Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Ayesha and I'm here with Laura. We are both accredited coaches and we specialise in supporting working parents as well as their line managers and their HR teams.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being with us today. A little bit about us before we get started. Between us, we work with organisations, HR teams, and leaders to help them better support parents through key transitions, particularly parental leave, and then that return to work period afterwards. And that work often includes coaching line managers because while organisations might have great policies, it's usually the day-to-day conversations between managers and returning parents that really shape someone's experience of coming back to work. The way that we've started working together is that one of us might work with the person returning and one of us will work with the line manager.
Yeah, which works really well actually because then there's no conflict of interest, I guess. Obviously, it's confidential. We have a coaching contract, but it's just really interesting that they both get, as we hope, a great experience from both perspectives. That's a really interesting way that we like to work together. So today we've got half an hour and we're going to be talking about understanding the parent experience as a whole. So we're going to dive into the broad experience of parental transition before, during and after leave. And in many companies, the focus tends to be on the return to work, which of course is key, but that return is actually just one moment in time in a much bigger transition. So if you want to support parents effectively, we need to design processes and systems that really work for them. And it starts with understanding what someone might be navigating across that entire journey.
Yeah. And before we start, then, just to set some expectations for this time together today and let you know that we've prepared some information. We've got a couple of slides that we're going to share with you, but we'd love it if this was an interactive session. And by that, we mean feel free to jump in with any comments, any thoughts, questions, or ideas as we go along. You can put comments in the chat box if you'd rather, and we can take a look at those periodically. And also, just to let you know that we are recording the webinar this morning and it will be shared on YouTube afterwards. So please feel free to do whatever you would like with your camera. We're very happy for you to have it switched on, but we'd understand also if you'd rather have it turned off. Um, so yeah, so obviously we've got half an hour together today, and it will be a bit of a whistle-stop tour because we're going to take a look at all the different parts of the transition, including pre-maternity leave or pre-parental leave, during leave, and we're going to look at the point of returning to work as well. So before we start, just to say really upfront that this is not about assuming that everybody has the same experience. We know, having done this for probably 20 years between us now, I've been doing it for 10 years. Probably you're similar, Aisha, I think, are you?
6 or 7 now. Yep.
Yeah. So we would say that every parent that we've worked with, every situation, every organisation, every return is completely different. But what we want to do is build some awareness of the common themes that come up again and again, particularly in the coaching work that we do with expectant and new parents. Um, and that awareness is often what is helpful to managers and HR teams that helps them move from um, good intentions to actually providing the right kind of support. Okay, so let's start then with this period before somebody goes on leave. So on the surface, it can look quite straightforward with handovers, documentation, wrapping things up. But underneath that, for the person who's going on leave, there's often a lot more going on. And we regularly hear concerns from people like, will I be seen the same way professionally? Am I handing over too much or not enough? What's the right amount? Will my role still be here when I get back? It's a very real worry for some people. What will my maternity cover be like? Want them to be good, not too good, just good enough, the right amount of good. So there's quite a lot of tension, even just in those examples that can be going on there. You know, people want to be responsible, they want to leave things in a good place. But at the same time, they might already be feeling physically, you know, remembering that they're going to be 8, 9 months pregnant, and emotionally, they might be stretched as well.
There's also something much deeper happening at this stage, which is identity shift. And I think we often find identity is a bit of a, well, it's quite intangible words, but essentially it's how we see ourselves and how we hope that other people perceive us. And for many people, work has been a huge part of how they see themselves. They've spent years, decades sometimes building up a career, build up a network. So as they prepare to go on leave, the identity can really start to shift. Some it's quite gradual, but for some people it's quite sudden. So you might see, for example, someone becoming more reflective about their career and what it means to them. They might be questioning what they want longer term in terms of work and family. And they might actually be feeling quite a sense of loss about stepping away from something. Again, something that they've built up, something they feel, strongly attached to and have put a lot of work into. That's the bit that's not always visible. And it's not always in those day-to-day conversations that managers are having before someone goes on parental leave.
Yeah, and that's it. I think at this point, generally what we hear happening is that the conversations that are happening are very surface level and very task focused, which needs to happen as well. They're about handovers, timelines, logistics, it needs to be dealt with. But then what's missing is this space for the individual to talk about how they're feeling and all of the stuff that we've just mentioned that's going on underneath the surface.
Yeah. So we're going to pause for our first reflection point, and we'd like you to think about your organisation. So if you're here live with us, then we'll give you some time in a second. But if you're watching this on YouTube later, then just pause the video to have a bit of thought if you need to. But what kind of conversations before parental leave are typically happening in your organisation? Where is that focus? So Laura's going to bring up a slide for us now to give a bit more context. So that's the question we'd like to reflect on. Is there any space, do you think, for a conversation beyond the practical things we've mentioned already? And what could that look like? So to give an example of what we see a lot, there is quite often great and regular communication before someone goes on leave between the manager and the parent to be. So as we've mentioned, handover, departure dates, logistics, and it's great on the surface. But I recently had a client from a specific industry where promotion cycles were very rigid. And she was really concerned about missing her promotion cycle because she's going on leave. So she was ready to be promoted, but she'd missed the key dates because she was going on leave. Then she'd probably miss the date again because she might come back just a bit too late. And the system was so rigid that that wouldn't be taken into account for her. It also wasn't discussed before she went on leave. So she went on parental leave feeling very uncertain about her future, about what she was going to be coming back to, and especially people might have been promoted over her, so what she was going to miss out on. So in that example, how could you have addressed her concerns and given her reassurance when actually we can't actually change the system sometimes that we're working in? So we're going to pause just for a couple of minutes for you to write down any thoughts you've got on this particular question on that slide. And if you want to share, please put anything in the chat, or just put your hand up if you want it to be more interactive. Either way. Oh, we've already got something in the chat there. Practical level conversations at the moment, lots of space to do more. So I guess with that in mind, it is, if you have space, what kind of things would you like to put in place for those conversations? And perhaps if you're kind of HR or line management, is there some kind of structure? How can you train those other line managers to have those right kind of conversations? That might be a way to look at it as well.
Mm.
We could put up the suggestions slide, couldn't we, Laura, I guess, to give a bit of starters.
Let me do that. Can you see that now?
Not yet.
Right, hold on 2 seconds.
The beauty of live TV, as they say.
Yeah. Let's see if this works.
Or if not, you can just read through them. Oh, that's coming up now. Something's appearing.
How about this one?
Yep, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah. So shall I just talk those through quickly?
Yeah.
Don't want to read it word for word, but these are the sort of conversations that sometimes you often miss. And like the example that you've just given about career aspirations, future opportunities, I think that people hold back, don't they? Because it is unknown. When you're going off to have a child, you don't really know what's going to happen in that time and when you come back. So you might not want to commit to something. But I think as an organization, if you're able just to create a space to, with that in mind, we're not going to hold you to anything. But at this moment in time, what are you seeing happening? What are your thoughts? It's not a plan, it's just a space to be able to talk about it so that we understand where you're at now. And we understand that that might also change. And then, yeah, this sort of space about concerns about what might happen while they're away. We talked about the maternity cover. What happens if my maternity cover? What happens if my maternity cover leaves on day one? You
Yeah.
know? And it might
Yeah.
be like, it's just nothing for you to worry about. We will deal with that while you're away. So let's make sure that we've got all the information, but just a space so that you can cover off like what would happen if, and knowing what those plans are.
Mm. And it's all
Really
about
important.
communication,
Oh,
isn't it? It's all about communication, isn't it? Which we'll come on to later in a bit more depth, but just keeping those conversation channels open and being honest and adult about these sort of things.
I think that's always like, if there's one key takeaway from this morning, it's going to be communication, isn't it? It's just all about communication and how that's being facilitated. Um, and this conversation, the third bullet put down about how they want to stay connected or not. And we know, don't we, that we work with people who sometimes they want to be involved. They still want to receive like their emails. They still want to have one-to-ones. And if that's what they want and you can facilitate it and that's fine, carry on. Some people don't want any contact at all, but I think it's that conversation so that they're getting us. It's not to say that tell us what you want and we'll make it happen. It's a space of tell us what your idea would be and we'll just see how that would work and trying to make it work for everybody.
Yeah.
And then that thinking about, and this bit about what support and reassurance they might need. As a manager, you're going to have a pretty good idea about members of your team and what they're like. And there might be some people who need some more reassurance, and others might be some people who really don't need it and will back away from it. So it's a lot of it as a manager as well is using your own intuition about what you already know about the people in your team. And then this bit about how you'll keep the conversation open beyond the handover. So just some ideas for you there. I'll
Perfect.
stop sharing now.
Great. So we can go to the leave bit, can't we now? Leave period.
Okay. So that was the pre-leave period. And this, we're going to move straight into, we said it was going to be a whistle stop tour, so we're going to move straight into this person is now on maternity leave, on parental leave, and this is where experiences can really vary. So for some people, maternity leave is a time where they want a complete break from work. They want space to focus on their family, they want to switch off, not feel connected to what's happening back at work. But for others, staying connected in some way feels really important. They might want occasional updates, they might want to be included in team communications, to be invited to key events, or simply to know what's going on so that when they do return, it doesn't feel like stepping into a completely different world. And the real challenge with it is that neither approach is like the right thing or the wrong thing to do. And that's where we're really suggesting that the important thing is that it's led by the individual and not assumed by the organisation. Because when we make assumptions about what someone wants, we're then unintentionally removing the opportunity for them to be honest about what would actually support them. And we did another webinar about this and about unconscious bias and the fact that sometimes it can work both ways. You might not have had children and you might be sort of making all these stories up in your mind or thinking about what your friends wanted or what you've seen happen before. And you might put that onto this person by, you might say, be at home with your family, cherish this time, don't stay in touch because that's what you think is the right thing to do and it's coming from a good place, but it might just not be what they want at all. And it can work the other way, where if you have had children, you might overlay your own experience and think, well, when I went on maternity leave, this is what I wanted, so therefore everybody wants that. Like, and completely understandable why you would do that, but it might not be what that person wants. So that's what we're saying is, please try not to make assumptions. And it's part of these conversations about when you're actually on leave, what does that look like to you? Yeah, and having those conversations early really matters, is really the best way to do it. Silence from the organisation can be interpreted in very different ways if those expectations haven't been discussed. For some people, silence and no information from the organisation can feel really respectful, like they're giving me the space that they know I want. But for someone else, it might feel like they've been forgotten. Like, does anyone even notice that I've gone? So it's not about getting the communication level right for everyone, but it's about creating an environment where someone feels comfortable to say what they actually need from day one, and knowing that as far as possible, that choice will be respected.
Yeah, I suppose also alongside that, obviously, there is so much change happening personally for that parent, whether they're starting a family or expanding their family. It is an enormous life transition. So when they've got the perceived maybe lack of support from the organization or the lack of communication, at the same time, they are going through their whole transition. So how is this all going to impact my time? What are my energy levels going to be like when I'm on leave? My priorities are bound to be different. Maybe they don't know what those are going to be yet, but it's all these questions going around their head, all that uncertainty. And alongside that, then is their perspective on work, their perspective on career, and how am I going to, what am I gonna be thinking at the end of 6, 9, 12 months about my career? So the period of leave is not a neutral pause, let's say. It's a period of real transformation, of change, of constant thinking. We often share the transition curve, the Kubler-Ross model transition curve, to show that actually all changes, and in this case we're talking about the parental transition, but all life changes, there is a curve we will go through, the way that we deal with these things, and that initial point of perhaps finding out that you're expecting a baby and going on leave, you can dip down quite significantly into a period of real uncertainty, potentially post baby, postnatal depression, that kind of thing. So all these things are going on at the same time, and then maybe overlaid on top of that is the organizational impact and communication or lack of. So it's understanding that the parent is going through so much personally. How can the organization support them the best way possible, knowing that they're already going through a huge amount in the background?
Mm, yeah. And that's where, when people are on leave, things like keeping in touch days can play a really important role. But I think the key with kit days is that they need to be used intentionally. So it's not just a box to tick or a quick how are things conversation, but they're used well. Kit days can help someone stay connected in a way that feels supported and right for them. And it's an opportunity for them to rebuild their confidence, to understand what might have changed while they're away, to reconnect with their team members, to attend important updates or training, and start to bridge that gap between leave and then returning. But again, we would say, like, have these conversations early. I don't know about you, Ayesha, but as I'm saying this, I'm just realizing that often I'll speak to people and they are not aware of kit days. They don't know how the process works. So it's all about sort of making sure that your policy works, but also bringing it into conversations, making sure that people are aware that they have kit days to take.
Mm.
Um, and
I
not
suppose,
just when they're thinking about returning.
yeah, the way that I mean, I suppose what defines that for me is quite often, but more often now, thankfully, I'll go on to a coaching call and the parent, my coachee, will be on their kit day at
Yeah,
work having a coaching. And that, but the shock of that is still quite palpable for them. Oh, you're using your kit days. That's amazing. Because
yeah,
actually, there's certainly historically, they wouldn't, I said they're not even aware of them. And I'd mention
yeah,
it to them and they'd be quite surprised that this was a thing they could even use.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And with that, what they're allowed to use them for.
Mm,
That
mm,
I think this is where it needs to be laid out that, you are allowed to have this time. These are the sort of things that you could use them for, or something else. And I think coaching, obviously, would be a fantastic thing to use a kit day for as well. So yeah, it's about letting them know what they can use them for, and sharing the benefits of them. So letting them know that, whether it's about keeping up to date with the team changes, maintaining connection, easing their transition back, understanding the practical financial side. The most important thing is that kit days aren't something that happens to someone on leave. They're something that should be shaped with them, based on what would be genuinely helpful for them. So I think in our follow-up email, we're going to signpost some useful keep in touch day resources to help you think about how these conversations can work in practice.
yeah. And I think another thing to add then is that the awareness is quite low quite often, but it's up to 10 days kit days, isn't it? People get. And even I don't think I've ever seen anybody who's taken their full 10 days. I don't know about you,
Mm.
Laura, but I've seen people take
I
three or
have, but not
four,
many. Yeah.
not many, who take the full 10-day sort of allocation. And I think that's just because they're not aware or not confident maybe enough to know how to use them, as you say, to know how to use them effectively and ask the right permissions, etc. around that. So I think again, it's more communication, as we said before. So we're going to pause again with another reflection question for you. And this is, how does the organisation currently stay connected with employees during their leave period? So everything we've been talking about just now. And do you ask the parent to be what they need in terms of communication while they're on leave? So Laura, do you want to bring up the slide with that question on it? There we go.
Is that there? Can you see that now?
That is there. Perfect. So we'll give you again a couple of minutes to think about that in terms of your own organisation. And again, if you want to share in the chat or in real life, please do. But maybe while people are thinking about that, Laura, you had an interesting case study in relation to this to me.
Well, just what we've been talking about really was that the person I was working with I started working with her pre her leave, and she shared with me that her line manager had put a monthly check-in the diary for while she was on maternity leave, and she had a great relationship with him. She knew that his intention was really good, and that he was seeing it as, oh, we really value you and we want to stay in touch. But she really wanted to just park work for a bit, be at home, have her baby. So part of the work that we did together was thinking about how could she let him know this actually isn't what I want. Um, so yeah, part of having those conversations, knowing that it's someone's best intention,
Mm.
but that's why it's so important to just ask the person what feels good to you. What would a good maternity leave look like to you?
Mm. Yeah. Shall we do we go to the next slide, Laura? And I can just, these are again some of our kind of thought starters, I guess, for you. But obviously asking what staying connected looks like for that person. So things like, how often would you like contact? And again, in my experience with coaches, sometimes they say, well, actually, for the first couple of months, nothing at all, thanks. I just want to completely, nest and be at home. But then after that, I'll get in touch with you, and then maybe we can establish whatever that cadence is. What kind of things would you like to hear about? And as you mentioned, is it team changes? Is it big org changes? Is it smaller, larger, whatever it might fit? What would you actually prefer not to receive? And I think this is quite important as well, because sometimes the news to someone away from the workplace could be quite negative or could give them things to think about what they don't actually need on their plate at that moment. So again, there's certain things that actually is better to keep away from them. Who should keep in touch with them? Is it their manager? Is it a team member? Is it some other kind of peer or buddy system?
Mm.
And then a great question is, how can we as an organisation help you feel included in this team still, even if you're not physically here? And again, a bit of a creative brainstorm on what that could look like. And I think we've got in the chat, so going on in the chat. So driven by the manager and colleague at the moment. So mixed, male dominated, so not always at the forefront, working on guidance for managers to cover all the topics and sharing some of our own experiences help positioning. Yes, I think guidance is great. I think that's if a line manager has some initial guidance and structure to again give them the permission almost to have these conversations, and give them the sort of scaffolding around them so they don't feel like they're kind of making it up on the spot. I think from there, it can grow quite organically, especially if people have good intentions. Just give them that starting point and then let them go on from there, because obviously people can then manage the way they have the conversation themselves. Is a great thing to have in place as a starter. So thank you for that.
Just really conscious of the time. Are we going to skip
Yeah.
ahead to now? We've had maternity leave and we are returning to work. And this is often where organisations put the most focus, and where we generally start working with people. I know sort of some organisations will allow the new parents to access coaching pre their leave, and sometimes we'll come in just right at that point, sort of just before they're returning to work, because this can be one of the most complex and challenging parts where everything's coming together.
Yeah, and so much has changed for that person having been on leave, as we've said. the perspectives have changed, identity's changing, all that kind of thing. So this is a really key transition point. And we often see, well, we always see actually a real mix of things happening. So there's usually, well, I mean, obviously, usually excitement about coming back, especially more so just having some of that adult time back, change of scene, getting to know people again, having a coffee without somebody dragging you by your ankles. But there's also a huge amount of uncertainty. Again, what am I coming back into? How am I going to feel? There's guilt about leaving baby behind, guilt about maybe not being present enough at work, not knowing what you're going back to. There might have been changes with the team or with the organization. And inevitably, there's going to be a dip in confidence, even if it's a second or third time or fourth time parent. That transition naturally brings with it a dip in confidence. So that's the sort of personal side, if you like. And then it's also then all of the logistics. So there's childcare, there's working patterns, there's sleep deprivation, and ultimately having to manage time and priorities in a completely different way. So a lot going on at this particular point.
Yeah, and that bit around confidence, I think, is often what will come up, isn't it? But it will mean something different to every person as well. And the thing with I think the reason that confidence is such a big topic is because it impacts on capability. So if you're feeling low on confidence, it will often impact on how you're actually performing. Might be asking questions like, can I still do this at the same level? Have I fallen behind? How am I being perceived now? Like Aisha said, it's like an identity piece. So you've gone through this big transformation at home, and often people are really feel really confident actually about being at home, and they're sort of realizing that, oh my gosh, I'm so much more capable than I thought. And then coming back into the workplace, there's a sort of shift of, oh, I'm not going back to who I was before. So who am I now then, and how does that work?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and because they're holding multiple roles at work and at home, and that can take time to integrate. So it's not just about getting back up to speed, it is about adjusting to this new way of working and this new way of being.
Mhm.
The one thing we often say is that people don't come back as the person that left, and that's not the problem. In many cases, people do come back with new skills. They're able to prioritize a lot more. They're a lot more resilient, and their empathy will have probably spiked. But it is a transition, and it does still need to be supported.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to do one last interaction, but given the time, maybe we should do this. We'll put the slides up, give you a second to note any things down. And all of this will be in follow-up emails that we send anyway, so we won't miss out on anything. This is about, again, that kind of return to work. What have you noticed when people return to work in your organization? So what goes well? And that could be in terms of their own personal settling back in or in terms of team or peers. And what do you think feels more challenging for the parent and also for the organization and the team maybe as a whole? So looking at different perspectives. So you could look at it through the eyes of a parent, as their line manager, as the team member, or even as the HR professional. So there'll be different perspectives on this parent's return. So what tends to go well and what tends to be a bit of a challenge. So we'll give you, well, maybe we should not skip past this, but we'll send this back in a recap, and then we can carry on with the content, can't we, in terms of time?
Yeah, so I'll stop sharing there because we're going to send out an email later with these
Yeah.
reflections on. So you can take a look. So we want to bring it all together, Aisha.
Yes, if we'll step back and look across all stages. So we've got before, during, and after leave. And just to kind of recap sort of the high level takeaways, if you like, we always see uncertainty and a lack of confidence before, during, and after. Major change across all areas, which include their emotions, their perspectives on life and career, priorities and shifting priorities, and of course, overwhelm at just having to then do these multiple roles as a parent and as an employee. And then the whole identity shift sitting beneath all of that. And it doesn't sit just neatly in transition, transition, transition. It covers the whole experience from the moment they find out they're expecting all the way through to actually, I think up to 2 years after coming back, it can take to really feel like you're kind of settled back in and things have normalized. It's a long experience and a long transition.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why offering support at like just one point, like just at the point of return, it just often isn't enough on its own, because it does take the consistency of support and understanding across the whole journey. So really starting right at the beginning, like we've said, and then, like you say, up to 2 years afterwards, that can make the biggest difference. So it's not just a one point fixes all. So yeah, so as we wrap up this section, we would love to leave you with a couple of the reflections. So thinking about where might your current processes be focused and where might there be gaps? And what's one small thing that you could take from today to better support the whole journey? Because those small shifts in awareness that can really make a difference and shape someone's experience of parental leave and their return to your organisation.
Yeah. So we really hope you found this useful. Obviously, it was whistle stop. There's a lot to cram into half an hour for essentially a 3-year transition that we're talking about. And we hope that we can relate it to your individual circumstances and situations at your particular organisation. If you need further support from us or just a chat information, follow us on LinkedIn, please. And we'll also be sending out follow-up email, as we said, with a recap on what we've spoken about today and then other ways of how we can support you. And then we'd love to hear your feedback because it really helps us shape these webinars, what you want to hear about, again, whether it's enough time or not enough time. So please do be very open with us. We're happy to have that feedback as well. So have a great sweltering day in the mini heat wave that's about to hit us today. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much.